The stars ahead seemed to shimmer with a new light as the human fleet moved closer to the Zorvan capital. The Zorvans had regrouped, but the human fleet had not only held its ground, it had pushed them back. The battle had turned in favor of humanity. But there was still a long way to go. The Zorvans were fierce, their ships large and heavily armed. However, the humans had shown that their will to fight was stronger than the Zorvans had ever imagined. Lieutenant Sarah Donovan stood on the bridge of her flagship, her eyes fixed on the battlefield ahead. The final confrontation was about to begin. The Zorvans had retreated to their capital, a massive fortress planet that sat at the heart of their empire. It was heavily defended, but Donovan knew this was their chance to end the war once and for all. All ships prepare for the final assault, Donovan said, her voice calm but determined. We hit them with everything we've got. We can't let them regroup again. This is our moment. Understood, Lieutenant, Captain Elias Grant replied, his face set in a stern expression. He had been with Donovan through every battle and he knew the stakes. This wasn't just about victory. It was about survival. The human fleet was battered, but far from broken. The Zorvans had underestimated the humans, thinking their overwhelming numbers and firepower would be enough to crush them. But the humans had proven they were more than just a nuisance. They were a force to be reckoned with. As the fleet moved into position for the final assault, the Zorvan ships appeared on the horizon. They were preparing to defend their homeworld with everything they had left. But the human fleet was ready. This time there would be no retreat. There would be no second chances. Back in the Galactic Council's command center, the representatives watched in awe as the human fleet moved toward the Zorvan capital. They had never seen anything like this. Humanity, once dismissed as insignificant, was now leading the charge in a war that had threatened to consume the entire galaxy. They're doing it, Varnax, the High Chancellor, said, his voice full of disbelief. They're actually doing it. The Sereth diplomat, who had once questioned humanity's role in the war, now looked on with a mixture of admiration and respect. I did not think they had it in them, she admitted, but they've proven us all wrong. We underestimated them, the Rixian representative said, his voice filled with frustration. We thought they were just a small, insignificant race, but they've shown us that size does not matter. It's the will to fight that counts. Yes, Varnax said, his gaze fixed on the holographic display of the battlefield. And humanity has that in spades. The Zorvans had failed to see what made humans so dangerous. They thought they could simply crush them with sheer force, but humanity had proven that it wasn't just about power. It was about the will to fight against impossible odds. The Zorvans had underestimated that, and now they were paying the price. Back on the human fleet's flagship, the tension was palpable. Commander Arthur Graves paced back and forth on the bridge, his mind racing. This was it. The final battle. The fate of the galaxy was about to be decided. He glanced at the tactical display, watching as the Zorvan ships moved into position to defend their capital. They were preparing for a fight, but the humans were ready. All ships engage, Graves ordered, his voice sharp. No mercy. We finish this now. The human fleet surged forward, charging at the Zorvan defenses with everything they had. The first wave of human fighters launched into the fray, darting in and out of the Zorvan fire with incredible speed. The Zorvans tried to respond, but they were slow, and the human ships were too nimble. As the human fleet pushed forward, the Zorvans retaliated with everything they had left. The battle became a blur of explosions and flashing lights as the two forces clashed in space. The human ships, though smaller, used their agility and speed to their advantage. They darted between the Zorvan ships, launching precision strikes at weak points in the enemy's defenses. Lieutenant Donovan watched as one of her own ships, the Valor, took a direct hit. The ship rocked violently, but the crew held their ground. Report, Donovan called out, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. We're damaged, but we're still operational, Lieutenant, the communications officer replied. We've lost shields, but we can still fight. Donovan nodded. Good. Keep fighting. We're not backing down. The human fleet pressed on, refusing to yield an inch. The Zorvans, despite their overwhelming power, were beginning to falter. They had never faced an enemy like this before, an enemy that fought with everything they had, with no intention of surrendering. As the battle continued, the Zorvans began to realize that they were losing. Their ships were falling one by one as the human fleet relentlessly pushed forward. For the first time, the Zorvans began to panic. Their leaders had never thought they would face a challenge like this. They had expected to wipe out the humans with ease, but instead they found themselves on the brink of defeat. "How is this happening?" one of the Zorvan commanders shouted, watching as human ships continued to strike their capital's defenses. "We should have crushed them." "They are too strong," another commander replied, his voice filled with frustration. "They keep adapting. We can't keep up with their tactics. They're unpredictable." The Zorvans had no answers. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. The human fleet was pushing forward with relentless force, and the Zorvans had no way to stop them. On Earth, the command center watched as the battle reached its climax. The human fleet was winning, but there was still a sense of caution. The Zorvans were a dangerous enemy, and they would not go down without a fight. President Ashford stood at the front of the room, watching the monitors with bated breath. "We can do this," Ashford said quietly, her voice full of determination. "We've come this far. We can't stop now." The human fleet continued to press on, and slowly but surely, the Zorvans began to fall back. The once mighty empire was crumbling, and humanity was leading the charge. As the final Zorvan ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, the battlefield fell silent. The human fleet had won. Against all odds, humanity had emerged victorious. Lieutenant Donovan stood at the bridge of her ship, her eyes fixed on the empty space ahead. The battle was over, but the war was not. The humans had proven they were not to be underestimated, and now the galaxy would have to reckon with that truth. "We did it," Donovan whispered, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. "We did it." As the sun set on the planet Nira, its reddish glow bathed the surface in an eerie calm. But inside the capital city, the air was thick with anticipation and fear. The people of Nira had spent the past few days preparing for the arrival of the humans. Their leaders had made the decision to welcome them, but there was an unsettling quiet that hung in the air. Would the humans be as helpful as they claimed, or was this all just a trick? Vithar, the council leader, paced back and forth in his private chamber. His mind raced with doubts, but deep down, he knew that they had no other choice. The disease had claimed too many lives, and if the humans didn't help, Nira would face extinction. He glanced out of the large window, looking up at the darkening sky, where the stars now began to twinkle. Somewhere out there, the human fleet was making its way toward their planet, bringing with it both hope and uncertainty. 2 hours had passed since the message arrived. The city buzzed with nervous energy. Nira soldiers stood at attention, guarding the landing zones, while technicians and scientists gathered in preparation. Everyone was waiting for the human fleet, but no one knew exactly what to expect. The first signs of the humans' arrival came when a series of bright lights appeared in the sky. The Nira had never seen ships like these before. They were sleek, dark vessels that appeared to move faster than anything their scientists had ever studied. The ships descended silently, and before long, the lead ship touched down in a massive clearing just outside the city. The air was thick with tension. The people of Nira watched from a distance, unsure of what would happen next. Vithar and a few of the high-ranking council members stood at the forefront of the gathering, flanked by Nira soldiers. As the ship's hatch opened, a figure emerged. It was a woman, tall and imposing. Her uniform was sharp and military, with a series of insignia that Vithar did not recognize. She moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the area as if she was all ready, preparing for something more than just a simple greeting. Behind her, a group of soldiers in similar uniforms followed, their faces serious and alert. "Admiral Rain," Vithar said as he stepped forward, his voice a little shaky despite his best efforts to remain calm. "Welcome to Nira." "Admiral," Rain stopped in front of him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made him uneasy. "I'm here to help. I hope you're prepared to work with us, because this isn't going to be easy. Her tone was blunt, but not unfriendly. We've heard about the situation. Our medical teams are already setting up. We'll need full access to your hospitals and any medical data you have. Time is critical. Vithar nodded, though he couldn't shake the unease in his chest. He gestured toward the city. We will provide what we can, Admiral. But I must be clear. Our people are wary. Trust does not come easily, especially when it comes to outsiders. Rain studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. I understand, but right now your people need help. I'm here to provide it. No strings attached. We'll leave once the job is done. The Nira were used to being independent, self-reliant. They had always kept a cautious distance from the Galactic Federation, and the idea of accepting help from outsiders was something they never thought they would have to do. But here they were, in a moment of desperation, and they were willing to take the risk. As Rain and her team made their way to the medical station, Vithar watched them carefully. Despite their cold demeanor, he couldn't ignore the fact that the humans were here, and they were offering help when no one else had. That alone spoke volumes. But as the hours passed and the humans set up their equipment, doubts began to grow. Vithar overheard several council members whispering amongst themselves. How can we trust them? One of them muttered. What do they want from us in exchange? Vithar held up a hand, silencing the conversation. We will watch them closely, he said. But remember, we have no other options. We either accept their help, or we face the end of our people. Admiral Rain and her team worked tirelessly through the night. The Nira scientists assisted, but they were cautious, watching every move the humans made. Rain had insisted on full cooperation, which had made some of the Nira leaders uncomfortable. But in the end, it was clear that their technology could provide the solutions they desperately needed. By the next morning, Rain had already made significant progress. The humans had discovered that the virus, though deadly, was not as foreign to them as they had initially believed. The Nira's unique biological structure, while a barrier to the disease's normal spread, also made them vulnerable in a way the humans had seen before in some of their own species. The human medical team's experience in dealing with similar diseases had given them a significant edge. Rain stood over a table examining samples through a high-tech microscope. We're close, she muttered to herself. Just a little longer. Vithar entered the room, his gaze softening as he looked at the humans working around the station. Admiral, he said, his voice uncertain. How long do you think it will take? Rain didn't look up but continued her work. A few more days at most. We have the treatment now, but it's a matter of perfecting it and distributing it. Once that's done, we'll be able to start saving lives. The Nira leader's shoulders slumped slightly. He felt a flicker of hope, but it was tempered by the knowledge that they had been so close to losing everything. You're giving us a chance, Vithar said quietly. But will you stay afterward? Or will you leave once you've cured us? Rain finally looked up, her expression serious. I'm not here to make your choices for you. If you want us to leave after the cure is distributed, we will. But just know this. You've got a lot of rebuilding to do. You're not going to be able to do it alone. If you want us to stay and help, we'll be here. Vithar nodded, the weight of the decision heavy on his mind. He had always believed in the strength and independence of his people, but now, for the first time in his life, he had to consider something he had never even imagined, relying on the very outsiders he had once feared. As the day wore on, the Nira people began to see the human efforts in a new light. The once cold, intimidating humans were now working alongside them, not as conquerors, but as healers. While many Nira still harbored doubts, there was a quiet realization that their salvation had come from an unexpected place. Vithar walked outside the medical facility, his thoughts heavy. The humans had arrived, and they had done what no one else had. The Nira would live, but would they ever be the same? Would they be willing to accept humanity into their fold, or would they choose to remain isolated, forever haunted by the fear of outside influence? As the human fleet stood ready to assist in the days ahead, Vithar knew that this was only the beginning. The humans had arrived, and their presence was both a blessing and a challenge. Nyra's future, now uncertain, rested in their hands. Omini. As the sun rose over Nyra, the once still air now buzzed with the energy of activity. The human fleet had made camp on the outskirts of the capital, their massive warships standing tall against the horizon. Their medical teams had already begun their work, setting up advanced equipment and connecting with Nyra scientists. The healing process had begun, but the Nyra were still unsure about the human presence on their world. Admiral Rain stood at the forefront of the medical station, her mind focused on the task at hand. She glanced at her team, all of them working tirelessly to develop a cure. Despite their success so far, there were still many challenges ahead. Rain had a reputation for being tough, but she knew that gaining the Nyra's trust was as important as solving the disease. She had promised to help, and she intended to keep that promise. Vithar, the leader of the Nyra, arrived at the station just as Rain was reviewing data on her tablet. His expression was a mix of curiosity and caution. He had been deeply affected by the sudden turn of events, unsure whether to see the humans as saviors or as conquerors. His people had never needed help before, and now they were forced to rely on outsiders. The thought made him uneasy, but he knew that they had no other choice. "Admiral Rain," Vithar said, his voice measured as he approached her. "The progress you've made is impressive, but how do you intend to help us in the long term? You can cure the disease, but what happens when it's over? Will you leave or will you stay to help rebuild?" Rain looked up, her eyes steady as she met his gaze. "We'll help however we can," she said firmly. "Our job here isn't just to cure the disease. We're also here to make sure the Nyra thrive again. That means working with your people, not just handing over a cure and walking away." Vithar nodded slowly. He had heard such promises before, only for them to be broken. But something about Rain's words seemed genuine. Perhaps, he thought, humanity was different from the other galactic powers they had encountered. But still, doubt lingered in his mind. The humans set to work, collaborating with the Nyra medical teams. It was quickly clear that humanity's knowledge of disease and biotechnology far surpassed what the Nyra had ever known. Rain's team, with their advanced tools and experience, began crafting a cure. They studied the virus closely, identifying its unique properties and designing a solution that would both treat the disease and help strengthen the Nyra's immune systems. The Nyra scientists were amazed at the humans' methods, which were both unfamiliar and incredibly effective. In the evening, Rain called a meeting with the Nyra Council. Vithar and the other council members gathered around a large table in a conference room. A screen was projected on the wall showing the progress that the humans had made. Rain stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding, yet not overbearing. "We've found the key to curing the virus," Rain began, her tone calm but confident. "However, this treatment will take time. We're working on manufacturing the vaccine now, but we'll need your help to distribute it. We'll also need access to your medical centers to administer it." Vithar looked around the table at his fellow council members, who were still apprehensive but more hopeful than before. One of the council members, Talir, spoke up. "And once you've cured us, will you stay to help with the rebuilding?" he asked, his voice skeptical. "Your ships and your people are powerful. We've seen that, but how can we trust you once the disease is gone? Will you leave us to pick up the pieces alone?" Rain met his gaze without hesitation. "We won't leave until you're ready to stand on your own. But we'll need to work together. The Nyra are strong, but rebuilding takes time, and I'm offering you our assistance to make that process easier. This isn't about control, it's about partnership." Vithar listened carefully. The humans had a blunt way of speaking, but there was something undeniably reassuring about their approach. It wasn't just about curing the disease, it was about helping the Nyra become stronger, together. And that was something Vithar had not expected. The council members exchanged glances. It was clear they were beginning to shift their perspective. Trust would take time, but the humans had given them hope, and that was more than they had received from anyone else in years. The following days were filled with constant activity. Nira hospitals were overwhelmed with patients, and the human team worked tirelessly to treat the sick. The vaccine was ready to be distributed, and its effects were already showing promise. The Nira people began to recover, some of them even starting to return to their normal routines. There was a sense of relief in the air, but also an undercurrent of caution. Though the cure was a step forward, the Nira knew that there was still much work to be done. Rain continued to work alongside the Nira scientists, guiding them through the process of adapting the vaccine for their planet's unique needs. Her team shared their technology and knowledge, teaching the Nira how to improve their medical systems for the future. Slowly but surely, the trust between the humans and the Nira was growing. Vithar, once wary of the humans, found himself spending more time with Rain. They had become unlikely allies, working toward a common goal. In private conversations, Vithar asked Rain about her people, about humanity's history, and their resilience in the face of adversity. He learned of the struggles humanity had faced throughout their history, how they had risen from near destruction to become a powerful force in the galaxy. There was something in Rain's eyes, a fierce determination that resonated with Vithar. He had seen that same resolve in his own people. "I never expected to find allies in humanity," Vithar admitted one evening, as they stood together on a balcony overlooking the city. "But I see now that you are not just warriors. You're survivors, like us." Rain smiled faintly. "We fight because we have to. It's in our nature. But it's not just about survival. It's about helping others when they need it the most. That's why we're here." Vithar looked out at the sprawling city below, his mind turning over the possibilities. Maybe this was the start of something bigger than either of them had anticipated. He had always believed in the strength of the Nira. But now, he saw the value of unity, not just with his own people but with humanity as well. The humans' plan was taking shape. The Nira were recovering, but the road to full recovery was long. Rain and her team continued to assist, but it was clear that the Nira had started to take charge of their own fate. The human presence had given them the tools they needed, but it was up to them to rebuild and grow stronger. As Vithar looked at the horizon, he realized that this was just the beginning. Humanity had answered their call, but what they did next would determine the future of the Nira and their place in the galaxy. Would they continue to rely on the humans, or would they stand on their own? Only time would tell. But for now, the Nira had hope. And that was a victory in itself. This part focuses on the collaborative effort between the Nira and the humans, highlighting the growing trust and the mutual benefits of working together. It sets up the foundation for future cooperation and the rebuilding of Nira society, Omini. The days following the distribution of the vaccine were filled with progress. The Nira people, once on the brink of extinction, were now recovering at a rapid pace. New treatments were being developed, and medical facilities were being upgraded, with the help of the humans. The disease that had once threatened to wipe them out was now under control, but despite all the strides they were making, there was still a lingering tension between the Nira and their human allies. Not everyone was convinced that the humans were here to help. While the leadership and many of the citizens had begun to see the value in the humans' assistance, there were others who viewed the humans' presence with suspicion. They saw the human fleet as an occupying force, not as allies. It was clear that the Nira had a long way to go before they could fully accept this new reality. One evening, Vithar sat in a quiet room within the council hall, staring out at the bustling city below. The sounds of construction, repair work, and busy medical teams filled the air. His thoughts were interrupted when Talir, one of his trusted council members, entered the room. The older Nira was visibly troubled, his eyes heavy with concern. "We need to talk, Vithar," Talir said, his voice low. "There are whispers among the people. Not everyone is happy with the humans' presence. There's a growing faction that believes we've made a grave mistake in allowing them to stay." Vithar frowned and gestured for Talir to sit. "What do you mean? I've seen the improvement in our people. The disease is under control. The humans have been nothing but helpful." Talir sighed, sitting down across from him. Yes, but at what cost? There are those who believe that the humans' help comes with strings attached. They think that once the disease is cured, the humans will want something more. They see their fleet, their soldiers, their presence here, as a way to control us. There are even rumors that they plan to take over Nira when we are weak. Vithar leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. He had heard similar concerns in the past few days, but he had dismissed them. These are just rumors, Talir. The humans promise to leave once the job is done. They've kept their word so far. Talir shook his head. I hope you're right, but not everyone believes it. There's talk of resistance. Some of the more militant groups are already making plans to confront the humans. If we're not careful, this could turn into a conflict we don't want. Vithar's heart sank. He had worked so hard to build trust with the humans, but now he feared that it could all unravel. He had trusted Admiral Rain and her team, but could he trust the humans as a whole? His thoughts were interrupted as a loud commotion rose from the streets below. Vithar and Tahlir quickly left the room and made their way outside. The city square was packed with a crowd of angry Naira citizens, shouting in protest. Their faces were twisted with fear and anger. In the center of the square stood a group of armed Naira rebels, their leader, a young Naira named Kale, raising his voice above the noise. Outsiders have no place here, Kale shouted, his voice ringing with defiance. The humans are not our saviors, they are our conquerors. They came here when we were weak and now they plan to control us. We will not stand for this. We must drive them out. The crowd roared, in agreement, their anger palpable. Vithar's heart raced as he scanned the scene. This was the very resistance Talir had warned him about. It had started as whispers, but now it had become a full-blown movement. Talir looked at Vithar with a mix of concern and frustration. We can't let this go on. If we don't act, it could get out of hand. Vithar took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing mind. He had to make a choice. He had worked so hard to bring peace to Naira, to convince his people to accept help when they needed it most. Could he allow this movement to tear everything apart? We need to meet with Kale and his followers, Vithar said, his voice resolute. This anger is rooted in fear. If we don't address it, it will only grow worse. That evening, Vithar and Talir met with Kyle and his group of rebels in a secluded room within the city's old temple. The walls were decorated with ancient symbols of the Nira, and the air was thick with tension. Kyle stood at the center, flanked by several of his followers. His eyes were full of fire as he looked at Vithar. You came here as our leader, Kyle said, his voice laced with bitterness. But you've betrayed us by letting these humans in. You've let them into our homes, into our lives. We're being controlled, Vithar, don't you see it? The humans will never leave. They'll take everything we have. Vithar stood tall, trying to remain calm in the face of Kale's rage. Kale, I understand your fear, but the humans are here to help. They have not asked for anything in return. They've given us a cure. They've shown us a way to heal. Why can't you see that? Kyle's expression twisted into a sneer. Because they don't care about us, Vithar. They care about power. They care about controlling us. We're not going to be their puppets. Vithar's heart pounded in his chest. He had worked so hard to make peace, to show the Nira that they didn't need to fear the humans. But now, Kyle's words were starting to sink in. What if Kale was right? What if the humans had an agenda that they weren't telling them about? He shook his head. I don't believe that. The humans have proven their loyalty to us, but you're not giving them a chance. I don't need to give them a chance, Kale snapped. We need to fight back before it's too late. As the days passed, the tension between the rebels and the Naira leadership only grew. Kyle's followers began to spread their message throughout the city, rallying more citizens to their cause. The streets were filled with protesters, some shouting for the humans to leave, while others demanded Vithar step down. Vithar was caught in the middle, trying to maintain order while also trying to keep his people from tearing themselves apart. Admiral Rain and her team were aware of the growing unrest. She met with Vithar one evening, concerned about the situation. We can't afford a civil war, Rain said, her voice sharp. The Nira are already weakened. If this resistance continues, it will destroy everything we've worked for. Vithar nodded, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. I know, but they won't listen to me. They've made up their minds. I don't know how to stop it. Rain looked at him, her expression hardening. Then we'll have to show them the truth. The humans didn't come here to conquer. We came to help. But if we have to fight to protect that, we will. Vithar felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had hoped it would never come to this. But if the rebels continued to resist, it might be the only way left. The resistance was growing stronger with each passing day. The future of Naira hung in the balance, and Vithar knew that the time for action was drawing near. Would he be able to calm the tensions and unite his people? Or would the fear and anger of the resistance tear his world apart? The choice was no longer his alone. The battle for Naira's future had just begun. The tension on Naira had reached a boiling point. The rebels, led by Kyle, were gaining more support, and their protests had become louder, more violent. Vithar, the leader of the Naira people, felt the weight of his decisions. He had worked so hard to bring peace, to build trust between the humans and his people. But now the unity they had fought for was slipping away. His worst fear had come true. The rebels were willing to go to war to drive the humans off their planet. For Vithar, the situation seemed hopeless. His people were divided. The humans, who had come to their aid, were now seen by some as a threat. The city had become a battleground of ideas, and in the middle of it all, Vithar was struggling to keep control. He knew that the Naira had to make a choice, but what if they chose the wrong path? One evening, after a long day of negotiations and failed attempts at peace, Vithar went to the medical station to check on the progress of the human team. The Naira were recovering, but the fear and anger toward the humans were only growing. He found Admiral Rain standing by a table studying reports. "Admiral," Vithar said quietly as he approached, "I don't know how much longer I can hold this together. The rebels are growing stronger every day, and the people, they're scared. They don't trust you, and I don't know what else to do." Rain looked up from the reports, her face tired but focused. "I understand, Vithar. The last thing we want is for this to turn into a conflict. We came here to help, but if the people of Naira don't want that help, we can't force it." Vithar sighed and ran a hand through his fur. "But I can't let them destroy everything we've worked for. I can't let Naira fall into chaos because of fear and misunderstanding." Rain regarded him for a moment, her eyes sharp and calculating. "We've given them the tools to heal, but it's up to them to choose their future. If they want to fight us, we will defend ourselves, but we don't want to be their enemy." Vithar was about to speak again when a soft voice interrupted them. "You're right, Admiral. It's not just about fighting. There's another way." Vithar turned to see a Naira scientist, Liana, standing by the door. She was one of the brightest minds on the planet, but she had always kept to herself. Liana had been one of the first to support the humans' efforts, and her quiet, but strong presence had earned her a reputation as an independent thinker among the Naira people. "Liana," Vithar said, surprised to see her there. "What do you mean?" Liana stepped into the room, her eyes thoughtful. "The problem isn't that we don't need help. It's that we've always seen outsiders as threats. We've been alone for so long that we've forgotten what it means to trust. But maybe, just maybe, if we show the people that there's another way, they'll start to see the truth." Rain raised an eyebrow. "What do you suggest?" Liana's eyes lit up. "The Naira have always been proud of their independence. But independence isn't the same as isolation. We don't have to push the humans away to remain strong. If we show the people that we can work together, that we can rebuild and heal together, then maybe they'll see the humans for what they are. Allies, not invaders." Vithar thought about her words for a moment. Liana was right. It wasn't just about fighting or choosing sides. It was about building something new. But how could he convince the rest of the people to see that? "You think the rebels will listen to that?" Vithar asked skeptically. Liana nodded. "Not all of them. No. But I've been speaking to some of the more moderate factions. There are many who are afraid, but they aren't blindly loyal to Kale's cause. They're just scared of change. If we can show them a different way, They might stand with us. Rain crossed her arms and looked at Vithar. She's right. We don't need to fight. We just need to give the Naira the choice, but they'll need someone they trust to lead them. Vithar's mind raced. Could he really pull it off? Could he convince the people of Naira to unite with the humans? To see them as partners and not enemies? I'll do it, Vithar said, determination rising in his voice. I'll speak to the people. I'll show them that this isn't about power or control. It's about survival. It's about a future where we work together. The next morning, Vithar addressed the Naira people from the steps of the council hall. A large crowd had gathered, some supportive, others filled with anger and doubt. The rebels stood at the back, their eyes narrowed, waiting for Vithar's words to falter. My people, Vithar began, his voice strong but tinged with urgency. We stand at a crossroads. Our world has been ravaged by disease, and the humans have come to help us. They have given us a chance to survive, to heal, to rebuild. But there are those among us who believe that we should reject their help, that we should fight against them. He paused, letting the words sink in. The crowd murmured, some shaking their heads, others looking uncertain. I understand your fear, Vithar continued. We've been alone for so long. We've been betrayed by outsiders before, and I know that some of you are afraid that the humans will take advantage of us. But I stand here before you to say that this is not their intention. They are not here to conquer us, they are here to help. The rebels shifted uneasily in the crowd, but Kyle was silent, his eyes fixed on Vithar. I have seen the truth, Vithar said. The humans do not seek power. They do not seek to control us. They have offered their assistance, and we must decide what kind of future we want. Do we want to continue fighting, divided and afraid? Or do we want to build something stronger together? There was a long pause. The tension in the air was thick, but Vithar held his ground. He knew that this was his moment to change the course of history for his people. We do not have to choose between our pride and our survival, Vithar continued. We can have both. The humans are not our enemies. They are our allies. And if we can work with them, if we can trust them, we will rebuild this world stronger than ever before. The crowd was quiet, their eyes fixed on Vithar. Slowly, murmurs began to rise. The rebels, though still wary, seemed to be listening. And then, from the front of the crowd, Liana stepped forward. Her presence was calm but firm as she spoke. I stand with Vithar, she said. I have worked with the humans. I have seen their methods. They are not here to hurt us. They are here to help. If we do not trust them, we risk losing everything. The silence was broken by the sound of applause. It was hesitant at first, but soon more and more people joined in, their fear slowly turning into hope. Vithar felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he watched the crowd begin to shift. The seeds of unity had been planted. The Naira were not fully convinced, but they were beginning to see the truth. As Vithar looked out over the people of Naira, he realized that the road ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in days, he saw a glimmer of hope. There was still much work to be done, but now they had a chance. The future of Naira was in their hands, and they would face it together with the humans by their side. This part focuses on Vithar's efforts to unite his people and convince them to trust the humans. It emphasizes the importance of trust, leadership, and the willingness to face fear in order to build a better future. A mini novel.